Hey guys, this is my fourth time trying to record this. We'll see how this one goes. Here's War of 1812, something we're looking at on the day before we leave for our break. If you're already gone for some stuff, just make sure you catch up on this so we can look at it and go through it. To do some activities in class as well. So first off, some people call this America's Second War for Independence. Some people call it the war that never happened. Some people call it war we should have fought. So we'll see what we get from this whole situation here. Okay, so one, let's talk causes of war. Napoleonic Wars are going on. So it's Napoleon, the French emperor, who was fighting most of Europe at this point, basically, okay? And he issued what's called the Berlin Decrees, basically said that nobody can trade with Great Britain, only with France. Great Britain replies with the Orders in Council, which says nobody can trade with France, only with Great Britain and other countries, so nobody can trade with anybody, right? And then they have the Milan Decrees, which say that France can take people's ships, and Britain starts impressing ships and sailors. So so basically we're saying that neither one can trade with anybody, and they can take our ships, they can take anybody's ships and sailors that are trading with them. And we're a country that depends on trade, so we're kind of getting shafted in this situation, okay? With the Chesapeake Leopard affair, this is in 1807. Jefferson's still president at this point, but basically a British captain fires on the USS Chesapeake off of the shores of the United States. So here is Atlantic Ocean, here's Chesapeake Bay. Here's where the USS Chesapeake is, one of our frigates, and gets shot at by the USS Leopard, by the HMS Leopard, excuse me. 3 dead, 18 wounded. He's like, whoops, I made a mistake, my bad. Okay. Jefferson's like, okay, fine, no more British ships docking American ports. So once again, trade. And also, hey, we're going to bring up some militiamen, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if he's Jeffersonian then, but whatever, that's a whole nother discussion. Okay. He makes the Embargo Acts we talked about in class already, where he said no trade with Britain and other countries. Well, TJ's done. He's done being president. He's like, I'm not running again. His Secretary of State, James Madison, runs. We'll learn that Secretary of State basically becomes the kind of like precursor job at this point. So if you were Secretary of State for a previous president, it's kind of like tabbing you as next president. James Madison wins with, like I said, 70% electoral college vote, carries most of the South, except for the very north up here. Pretty overwhelming, okay? Here's James Madison, all 5 foot 400 pounds of him. Smart dude, wrote the Constitution basically, wrote the Bill of Rights essentially. Really smart guy, right? I've heard him described as what's called a cold fish. He didn't have much of a personality. Not a lot of riz, as the kids would say these days. Kind of boring, kind of nerdy, but yet he definitely, was a very smart guy. He walks into a situation that's kind of crappy, though, okay? He has Napoleonic Wars going on. And so with that, one last thing Jefferson does is called the Non-Intercourse Act, which is saying we're not going to work with any other people either. Madison has passed something called Macon's Bill Number 2, which basically lifts all the embargoes, but says that if another country lifts their embargo on us, we'll then lift our embargo on them. So like if Britain would have end the restrictions, then we'll put an embargo on France, basically kind of thing. He also has issues with Native Americans on the western part of the country happening, all those kind of things he kind of inherits. Now, like I said, cold fish, kind of weird personality. He is able to pull like the bell of the ball. He definitely way outside his way outside his weight class, basically, if you will, or outside his league. Not sure he's actually playing the same sport. When he snagged Dolly Madison, his wife, she was like the entertainer. She was the one who was like the bubbly person, that kind of stuff. Kind of sets the tone as one of the first ladies, as the entertainers, that kind of stuff. She was always hosting parties and having ice cream, those kind of things. Supposedly oyster ice cream, which I'm not sure I want to try. But she was like a huge asset because she was able to do all the things he wasn't. She had the personality, he had the smarts. Together, they definitely made a great couple that way. Once again, he probably was playing way outside his league. He may have been playing a whole different sport when he was able to court and marry Dolly Madison. So here's Non-Intercourse Act real quick, something that replaced Embargo Act. Basically, New England was forced to be some self-sufficient again. So Jefferson made this whole thing happen. He's like, yeah, no more trade, done. Okay, fine. So now we got to start making our own manufactured goods, right? So we kind of start laying the groundwork for the U.S. industrial network up in the north, which is one of the things that Jefferson really hated. So it's kind of funny that Jefferson ended up making the industrial ideas begin, but he also didn't like it in general. So it's kind of an interesting kind of situation how it goes down. There was accusations that Britain was instigating Native Americans on the western area. They were providing guns, that kind of stuff. Led to the Battle of Tippecanoe with Tecumseh, who had made his confederacy of Native Americans to fight to protect their homelands. essentially, William Henry Harrison, the governor of the Indiana Territory, had gotten Native Americans to sign away like 3 million acres of land. There was a war fought at a village called Tippecanoe. That's where Harris became famous because Tecumseh's brother was defeated at that point. Tecumseh was on to fight for the British in the War of 1812. So we have these dudes named Warhawks. They're like, hey, hold up, all this stuff's going down, we should go fight a war. We got Henry Clay from Kentucky, a name you'll hear for the next month and a half because the dude never dies. John C. Calhoun, who definitely needs a better hairdresser, and we'll see later on has a creepy neck beard. But these two guys from the West and the South are like, hey, let's fight a war. These British guys are ticking me off. They're inciting Native Americans. They're causing all these problems. Let's go fight a war. Can we fight a war right now? That's a big question, okay? So election goes then up to 1812. Again, Madison wins a second term pretty overwhelmingly. And we end up getting to what called Mr. Madison's War. So, big problems with this, right? So, number one, we don't have a lot of military, right? We have a 12-ship Navy versus Britain's 800 ships. We don't do drafts because Americans don't like drafts, okay? It's not a thing we prefer our militia, that kind of stuff, which are pretty disorganized, not well trained. Financially, we have a lot of paper money going around right now, which is basically worth nothing. We're not getting any money from tariffs, that kind of stuff, and we see different areas not getting along great, right? South, north, west, they're also kind of like, a little iffy with each other. Are we prepared to go fight a war right now? Probably not. Well, so let's talk about why this whole thing goes down here. So here's our war we happen. Officially, the war because of impressment. British ships, sailors impressing American ships, American sailors. That's the official reason for it. All things that are going down are kind of the reasons why it happens, though, okay? And we'll get more into that as cause later on. So with the war here, we see Britain blockades us because they have a giant navy, okay? And for a lot of fighting happens up here in Canada, and it happens down here around D.C. is where most of the activity kind of takes place. So we decide, first off, let's invade Canada. Cool. All right, fine. So we invade up here to Montreal, Fort Niagara. The U.S. ends up burning York, which is future Toronto. We burn the capital of Canada to the ground, basically. So here's York. That's in 1813. Woo, we're winning. Woohoo. Okay, all that kind of stuff. Not quite. One of the reasons we're doing really well is that Britain's still fighting the Napoleonic Wars. Most of their best soldiers are in Europe, still fighting against Napoleon. That war ends in 1913, and they're going to come for us. We have Native American things happening on the Western Front. So Battle of Thames was in Canada up here. Was a battle against a lot of Native American tribes as well. They're allied of the British. Horseshoe Bend later on will be also a battle down in Alabama with five tribes that we'll talk about later on. One of the things that the British do is they invade. So the Chesapeake Campaign, they invade Washington, D.C., they burn the White House, burn the Capitol. In fact, when they get in there, James Madison has to escape. Dolly Madison is famous for taking the life-size portrait of George Washington, breaking the frame, rolling up, and getting out of there, so it's not burned by the British. In fact, when the British get there, supposedly there is a full dinner set up that James Madison is going to have. So they sit and they toast wine to little Jemmy's health. That's to be James Madison, and they toast to his health and all that kind of stuff. And they eat his food, drink his wine. They go to the Congress. They go to Capitol Building. They throw a mock Congress of condemning the United States, and they burn the Capitol and burn the White House. Luckily for them, though, there's a hurricane going on. Tornado comes in. Mother Nature ends up putting the fires out with a giant storm, and it kind of saves some of the parts of the building. Today, if you go to parts of the U.S. Capitol, I was at in the Senate wing. I got to go to the Senate gallery. You can still see some of the scorch marks in the original work from the Capitol where it was burned. There's also when you start seeing Fort McHenry and Francis Scott Key, who's on a prison ship out in the harbor, the bombing of Fort McHenry, trying to get into Baltimore, which was really at the time one of our most important cities, and Fort McHenry staying there at the night. That's where the Star Spangled Banner comes from, with all night being shelled and Fort McHenry being able to take the beating and not fall, and Baltimore kind of stay safe. We did have one win, Old Ironsides, our U.S. Constitution. So is one of our original frigates, right, we talk about, that had a perfect record in fighting against the British with 42 wins and 0 losses. Supposedly it was the oak panels were like iron, right? So it's called Ironsides. It's still in commission today. It's the oldest ship to ever fire a shot in anger, oldest ship around today that's still in commission that has sunk a ship. And so today is run by the Navy as an educational type thing. Most of the ships have been replaced because of just age, whatever, but it's free to go on in Boston, and I encourage y'all to do it. Fort McHenry, obviously, we talk about that again. Here's Fort McHenry. and protecting the harbor. And I'll show you some cool pictures later on of like kind of what that'll kind of look like and stuff as they were doing it, as it was going on. But this is a way to protect the harbor of Baltimore, because if the British taking Baltimore, it could be a lot worse probably. Now, most of the battles are happening in the south, happening in the north, by Canada in the west. Not much happening up in the northeast, except for the fact that they can't do any trade. The northeast depended upon trade, and so New England considered what's called secession. New England's like, hey, all right, listen, here's the deal. We're mad right now. We have a convention. Let's threaten to change some stuff, or we're going to break away. And so they wanted more economic assistance for New England. They wanted 2/3 majority for embargoes, and those kind of things are happening. They want to get rid of the 3/5 compromise, so they got more representation. They want a one-term president. And they also talk about basically seceding from the Union, saying, hey, let's break away because right now the rest of the country's not helping us. Didn't really matter. It was mostly Federalists who were doing this against the anti-Federalist Madison. And in the end, nothing really happened with it. They were perceived as traitors, weakened the Federalist Party. And at that point, the Federalists are basically donezo because they have threatened to leave the country. By the end, we signed the Treaty of Ghent. Ghent is in Belgium. They take care of this in December. Fortunately, we can't get the information back soon enough, so we still fight the Battle of New Orleans down in 1815, where Andrew Jackson famously leads a group of American soldiers and militia and everybody in New Orleans against the British and wins the battle. With the treaty, nothing really changes. Basically, we're taking everything to what it was pre-war. So nothing really happens because of it. There's not really a lot either side gets out of it. Basically, promise not to impress anybody anymore, which we already had. Promise to all borders going back to where they were before. Not really fought for good reason. Battle of New Orleans was kind of a big deal. It's where the U.S. actually beats the British, right, under Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson becomes a big name because of this. And they're able to use the land and the area where they are and kind of unite all these different people together from New Orleans to fight this huge battle. You can kind of see where the British are coming in, and they're being repulsed multiple times by the American soldiers and the assembled defense of New Orleans by Jackson and his guys. Kind of a big deal because, look, we just beat the British. Look at us. Woohoo! Even though the war was already done, we still beat the British, right? And so we can say we have a victory, not just, yeah. Later on, we see battles of Horseshoe Bend happen later on down in Florida, and other places around here as well that kind of happen where Jackson basically takes his own initiative and starts attacking Native Americans in Florida and Spain. Not supposed to do that. Does it anyway. Doesn't really get in trouble for it either. All right, that's our foreign policy stuff we're looking at, guys. Notice we have this time period here, it's War of 1812. We're like, yeah, we didn't lose. We didn't lose. We didn't win, but we didn't lose, right? So we have a lot of nationalism. People are like, hell yeah, let's go America. With this era of good feelings we talk about, we built our manufacturing because of the embargoes that take place in the north, and we'll see a big change in the United States. We're going to see more national infrastructure come together. The idea of having a professional full-time military, so in case stuff goes down with Red Iraq, we get more international respect because we took on the British and didn't blink, right? Native Americans were weakened a lot, and we see more stuff going west. So while kind of a blip in history, it's still kind of a big deal. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. I'll see you guys in class.